Thank you very much. First of all, I just want to thank the hosts, Computerworks, for asking me over to give this presentation today. I'm very honoured that they've asked me to do that. It's a privileged position to be in. So, thank you very much for the introduction, but just a few things about me. Director of the Design Bureau, where we're based in Rugby in the West Midlands in the UK, and we've been involved for BIM for just a little while now, and I'm very passionate about the subject, as you will probably find out through the presentation. So just a quick few pictures about Design Bureau, just so you can understand how we've grown over the years. 1991, there were 7 of us there, myself, my wife, who sat down there. And as we've grown in size over the years, we've got up to about 40 people, and the other one on the right-hand side there is a current picture. So we've been committed to Vectorworks, Minicad, from the outset. So I've been a user of Vectorworks for 20 years now. And the reason that we've stuck with Vectorworks over that time is that it's given us the freedom to deliver the buildings that we wanted to deliver. And we've also been challenged on a number of occasions while we use this software from sort of the bigger players in the UK. But I can say from my heart that Vectorworks has always delivered for us and delivered the buildings. And we've always met the challenges that have been presented to us. So the philosophy at Design Bureau is, in terms of architecture, is about the accessibility of our clients for healthcare is our main market. And it's about engaging with the users of the buildings from the outset, involving them in the process and giving them choice, planning with them the new facilities that they're commissioning from us, because ultimately at the end of the day, they are the client, they're paying the budget. So that is the ethos from Design Bureau. Here's just a few pictures of some completed buildings that we've done and some of the areas that we cover in terms of our skills. So now we're getting to start talking about BIM. And it was in 2008 when I first came across the subject, and I was building a community hospital for a large Tier 1 contractor, Lang O'Rourke in the UK. And at that time, we thought that Lang O'Rourke would be asking for all projects to be done in BIM by 2010. It turned out that that wasn't the case. We also didn't really understand BIM at that time, and Lang O'Rourke's perception was that it was designed for manufacture. So they would obtain the information for their off-site manufacturing from our models. Did we do anything from that point on? We didn't. We sat back for a couple of years, and there was no further momentum. After a couple of years, we started to get more involved in BIM again, and the conversations were happening more frequently in design team meetings. So we thought at this time it was about time that we actually sat down, did some reading, and tried to understand it. Well, I can assure you at the beginning there was so much information available to us. It was overwhelming. We didn't know which way to go, and we didn't know what to do. We did know at this point, however, that the government was mandating BIM on all centrally procured projects by 2016. So we knew there was a deadline, and we had some initial frustrations. The next thing that happened is we secured a project with Lang O'Rourke to build a pathology building in Glenclwyd in Wales. And on this project, Lang O'Rourke gave us the opportunity to use BIM. They also stipulated that we could fall back to 2D if we needed to. So that was a bit of a lifeline for us on that project. And we decided to jump at the chance because we felt this would be a fantastic education. And looking back now, I realise that it was a great education. To actually have deadlines and to actually have something to deliver gave us an immense focus. And since we've gone on from this, we've looked at other areas of BIM and we've trialled various things. But without a deadline, it's very hard to actually have that momentum. So we were lucky in that respect. We were also lucky that the structural engineer, the mechanical and electrical engineers, and the contractor all bought into the process. So we weren't doing this as architects in isolation, saying, look at our great models, look how fantastic we are. Everybody around the design team wanted to be involved. And I think that is another key point. You have to want to. You have to be involved. Anybody who is less passionate will struggle. You need a passion to push forward. So one of the first things that we did with Lang O'Rourke was that we went to their offices in Manchester. Myself and a colleague went there for a whole day. And we sat with their BIM manager at that time. And he talked us through all of the protocols and all of the standards that Lang O'Rourke use. It was a tough day, but it was very educational. And we benefited a huge amount from such a large contractor giving us a small to medium enterprise that opportunity. So we came away from that meeting and we knew what they wanted from our model. And they wanted floor areas, linear measurements, wall areas, ceilings, envelope quantities, FF&E schedules, and a model for clash detection. We didn't know what we wanted as architects from the model at that point. We only knew what the contractor wanted. And we were slightly concerned at that point that we'd signed up to deliver all of that information from BIM. However, they had given us the lifeline we could drop back. So we initially set up some training with our equivalent supplier in the UK, which is Computers Unlimited. We upgraded to the architect version because we needed the architect version to deliver the model. And what we did initially was we selected a team of people to upgrade their software. So we had 29 Vectorworks licenses, and our first batch we upgraded about 10. And I think that was a mistake. But I understand why we made that mistake, and we were hesitant in terms of the financial commitment. But when we started to see what we could get back from those models, and we could get back from drawing in a 3D environment, we were finding the process extremely economical, and it paid for itself very quickly. But so that would be the one piece of advice that I would pass on. So we had the basic 3D training in Vectorworks Architect with Computers Unlimited, and that was just 3D training. It wasn't BIM. It was just how to use the 3D tools in Vectorworks. We learned how to use the spaces, how to use the stories, how to set a model up, and how to work group reference. Really quite basic things at the start, but a foundation to move forward. We then identified within the practice that we needed an in-house champion. We needed a BIM manager, and we set about looking for individuals within the practice who'd shown a keen interest and who could deliver on those roles. We then sat down, myself and my colleague in the office who we promoted to BIM manager, and we put together a document which we called our strategic steps. And we drew a simple staircase, and we identified each step on that staircase of what you needed to know in terms of your progression. We then divided that into columns, and we identified the key people who needed to know about 3D modeling, who needed to know about BIM, and later on who needed to know about the data, and what the management structure needed to understand in terms of BIM, because they don't need to know how to draw a wall in 3D, but the management structure needs to understand BIM. And that was called our little strategic steps to BIM, and we sat down on regular sessions with those people in the office. Once a month, we had a drop-in session on a Monday lunchtime where people could just come and see us. We sat down around the table just like that, and we started to upskill the team, teach them the various aspects, depending on their role within the business, how to deliver either 3D models or how to deliver BIM, what the managers needed to know when they were talking to the clients to understand the process. So then we got into the actual delivery of our Glan-Clwyd project. And of course, we were hesitant in terms of diving straight into 3D. So what we did, and we were fortunate enough to have the opportunity where we set up a 2D stream of people, and we had a 3D team as well. So these are the two-dimensional drawings that were initially produced in terms of the space planning, room arrangements and adjacencies, and the two-dimensional plans that we took into the user group meetings to get the original sign-off to the schemes. And these are at a 1 to 200 level, relatively early stuff. Meanwhile, the 3D team was drawing the building in 3D based on the initial strategic arrangement diagrams. And the first few models were inaccurate, they masked the issues, and they were purely for visual only. But we were starting to get some relatively decent stuff out of the model. We soon understood that the 2D team was overtaking the three-dimensional team in terms of the outputs. And then we were able to take better drawings to our client meetings and the clinical users. We could show them the clinical rooms in 3D. We got better buy-in from the users. We got quicker sign-offs. So it was at this point that we realized that actually the 2D team was struggling to deliver any useful information that we could take to those meetings. So we moved the 2D team into helping the 3D team, and ultimately just jumped in feet first and decided that from that point there was no going back. So we delivered the planning drawings and the 1 to 200 sign-off information all from the model that we had created, and we did that within the space of about 4 weeks. We learnt at Computers Unlimited the basic model structure, and we use that for all of our models now, and that sits within our BIM protocol in the practice. That information is relatively available through various websites, but the structure that we learnt at Computers Unlimited was a good foundation, and ultimately we had to convert our 2D workflows into a 3D setup, so our layer structure changed, our sheet structure changed, and our classing structure changed. We also learnt from this process that we had to have a library of resources. Our 2D workflow never really had a library of components or a library of information to call upon. We just generally drew it from scratch each time. But we understood that the benefits of the reuse of this information through the model. So we had a couple of individuals within the practice just sat down and went through every wall type, every floor type, every ceiling type they could conceivably think of. We structured that information within our Vectorworks environment, and then we used that to deliver the construction drawings for the project. And ultimately, we did the same for windows, the same for doors, furniture, and so forth. That then gave us the schedules and the information that Lang O'Rourke was asking for at the outset through their BIM protocol. So a little bit more information about why we've continued with BIM. And as I mentioned earlier, that the government mandate is to deliver all government procured buildings in BIM by 2016. We are in some way lucky that the government has been really prominent in terms of what they've put together for BIM with their task groups, with their website, with the documentation that they've put together. It's been a huge help in terms of convincing the clients and the smaller contractors that we work with that there's a real necessary need to move forward with BIM. You can download this information from the UK websites. There are 4 Pathfinder projects that have got a huge amount of data and a huge amount of information on there that demonstrates the advantages of using BIM through a project workflow and the life cycle of the building. I've mentioned the government's documents, and there are 7 documents that the government have put together that identify what's needed within the model and within the BIM protocols to deliver that information. They've also set up a series of regional hubs, of which I'm a core member of the West Midlands Regional Hub, where we meet once every 3 months, have a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea, and we basically talk about the problems and share information. So some of the reasons that the government have done this is that they've looked forward in the UK to 2025, and they've delivered a government strategic objective document. And in that document, it talks about BIM in about 3 places. It doesn't feature massively in the document, but it's the clear driver for delivery of BIM in the UK. These figures are taken directly from that document. And the government's forecast in the UK is that they can't afford the building stock that they need in 2025. So they've had to look for ways of making buildings more economical and making more use of their existing building stock. And BIM is only one part of how they're doing that, along with all of the other big data issues that they're looking at. So they're expecting our buildings to be 30% lower costs over their life cycle, not just the construction phase, which is only a very small part of the process, over the 25-year cycle of the building. They're expecting faster delivery, So the models and the integration and the clash detection and the sharing of information and the speedier delivery of the drawings, the ease of construction on site, the less questions and requests for information that will come back from site, and the more accurate information they have, they think will deliver a 50% faster delivery. We know as a global economy that we've got to work on our CO2 emissions. So having all of this data within the model, being able to use the model in various different ways to get alternative thermal performances from the model, get quick results from our M&E engineers that tell us if we're making the right changes to the model, the right changes to the building to deliver a more thermally efficient building, are now available to us at a very early stage in the design. So we should be beating the targets that we've been set in terms of CO2 reduction in the UK. And another factor that the government has looked for as well is in terms of export. The government wants to export our BIM knowledge and our BIM talent to the rest of the world. So they've seen a business objective there. By upskilling their workforce, they think they can go out to the rest of the world and sell that. And we are starting to see that now with some of the larger contractors that are winning more work abroad, and they could attribute it to BIM. I've talked about the 2025 vision. You can download that from the government website. It's a good read. It tells you the reasons behind it and talks about lots of factors that are involved and comes back to cooperation, coordination, people and leadership. So this is the suite of 7 documents. And as I said earlier, I think we are lucky that the UK has put so much effort into this. You can download all of these documents from the BIM Task Group website. If you don't know them already, they are worth looking at. They talk about the integrated project delivery cycle in the PAS 1192 documents, the naming structures, the naming conventions, the digital plan of work. So it talks about how much information should be in your digital model at what stage of your project life cycle. It's clear, it's prescriptive, and we should all be working to this in the UK. So it doesn't matter whether you're M&E, architecture, contractor, or who you work for, it's a common source of information. Some of the couple of things that are still outstanding are Uniclass is currently outstanding at the moment, which is the classification of construction components. That's currently gone out to tender for delivery from one of the major BRE or the MBS in the UK. So what we did at Design Bureau is we sat back from this. We looked at our current business management system, our current protocols in terms of Vectorworks, and we thought, what do we need to do to make our business ready for 2016? And that culminated in the production of all of these documents, which are all versions of a government document. So they either come from something in BAS 1192 or they come from something in PAS 1192. But it sets a structure up for the employees within our practice to understand how this information is put together and to document what they do. Because along with BIM, you need all the paper documentation. You need to agree with the team what you're going to produce and when you're going to produce it, and you need to honour your promises. So this suite of documents sets out at the outset what, when, why, and how. So if we go back to BIM now, we've talked about our strategic steps, drop-in sessions, one-to-one training, and just-in-time training. And one of the things I learned by going through that process is obviously the training can take many forms. And you can't just train people with one method. Everybody learns in a different way. So our practice has technologists, interior designers, managers, job winners, architectural assistants, and they all have different needs. So it's about tailoring that information to suit that individual. So we go back to pathology now, and we've got the information that we ended up with at 2D. We've got our 3D basic model, which gives our client a better understanding of the building in three-dimensional form. Our client being the NHS, we deal with the clinicians, and they're on the front line. They deal with people that are poorly. They don't understand drawings, but they understand 3D drawings, so that gets better buy-in. So a small diagram at the bottom there to try and understand what we're trying to do and how we're trying to promote it. We've got an electronic asset and we've got an as-built asset. Those two items need to communicate with one another to make sure that we deliver this life cycle information for the building. So here's a couple of other slides on the advantages that we get from BIM and some of the drawings that we can take into our user meetings. And we can get this information quite quickly now we've got our library of components. So earlier user involvement, so at 1 to 200 level or at room data sheet level, we can take in a relatively quick model that we can produce to the clinicians and we can show them what their room is going to look like. We can take our laptops and projectors and we can modify these in that meeting, should we choose to. Live demonstrations are always scary, but the opportunity is there to do this in a live environment. So we speed up the design process, we get better visuals, we get better buy-in from the stakeholders, so people are less likely to change their mind if they've seen this. So if, for example, we give the clinician a two-dimensional plan, they might be embarrassed to say they don't understand it and sign it off. But we know that if they find something wrong later on, we'll be expected to change it. And there's a history of that happening within how we've delivered buildings in 2D. If we show them the 3D visuals, they understand it and they're more happy to engage with you on a level that they understand as a clinician and you understand as an architect or a technologist. So hopefully it makes better decisions. We get better buildings, we get better hospitals and better healing environments. So this is a project that I completed in around about May. We had handover in May. From this model we had all of our schedules, all of our three-dimensional views, and we had our user engagement. And for me, one of the key strap lines for BIM is a single source of truth. In the past, we've been the contractor will cherry pick which document they want to use. If you have 3 documents and they're all different, they'll cherry pick the cheapest document. And so at least with BIM, if it's wrong in every document. They can't cherry pick it. It's wrong, but there's no opportunity for them to decide which document they want to pick or which one they want to say they priced. You've got a clear fact. It's a single source of truth. So that eliminates some of those discussions that have gone on in the past. And the bottom 2 pictures there are the virtual picture that we used to explain to the client what they were getting. And these were children. This is a CAMS unit, so this is for children with mental health problems that have done some really horrible things. They were part of the user engagement. They used the process of building this building to help them heal. So we sat down with these individuals who were challenging, and we went through various different options with them, and ultimately what we delivered electronically is on the left, and what we delivered on the right there is the actual constructed building. And I think that's a great way of demonstrating client buy-in. So these are a few pictures of the completed building at Glen Clwyd. There's nothing more to say other than it proves we actually built it. So in terms of the model then and exchanging the model, we've been challenged in the UK by the main contractors who want the native model. They always ask for the native model. Well, the native CAD model, from my point of view, is useless to them. It's useless to the client. It's useless to anyone because there might be 60 stakeholders in the delivery of a building. If you looked at all of the subcontractors, the native model at every one of those is a different native model. So we've got this universal language, which is IFC, and I'm a firm believer of Open BIM, a firm believer that we need to exchange models in a format that people can read now and people will be able to read in the future. Because we need this data to have a long life. If we're going to meet the targets that the government has asked for, it needs to have a life as long as the building. And for us, it's IFC. So we were challenged by Lang O'Rourke for a native model, but we demonstrated through some exchanged early models that the IFC information that we were producing from Vectorworks delivered what the contractor wanted. And I would advise anybody that's going into this is in the outset, exchange a basic model at the outset. A couple of hours work, just put something together, a basic box, a window and a door, export it as IFC, send it to all of the people that are engaged in the team and make sure they can read that information. And they will be able to read it. Get some feedback from them, find out what's missing, and if they want more data, that's your opportunity to input into your execution plan and agree what you're going to provide. And ultimately, by doing that, you'll get better outputs, you'll get better involvement later on. Our initial sort of entrance into IFC was blind. It was pure luck. We didn't know what it was, we didn't know what it was doing, we just knew that we had to do it that way. But what we've since learnt is that the basic tools within Vectorworks give you a very good IFC output. And we've learnt to modify existing components rather than generate new components. And ultimately that gives you a better output. And the first time around we were lucky, we modified existing walls, and we modified existing components, and we were lucky there. But we learned, we fed that information into the team, we fed that information back to Vectorworks, and we've moved forward with it. And we will continue to move forward with Open BIM, and obviously one of my passions now is to get more involved with building smart. So you've had a presentation already on Celebri today, but some of the points, I don't know whether you went over them, but it's very important to test the information before it leaves your practice, and you need to validate what's going out. And the way that we did that when we first started was to download the Celebri model viewer. It's free. You can download it, you can import your IFC model, you can do a visual check, you can do visual clash detections, and you can do this for free. And it paid off for us because there were certain things that went slightly wrong, I think on the next slide, but those were a few images from our Vectorworks 3D model that we were able to look at for free in Celebri and identify whether or not we were sending out quality data to the contractor. So the contractor federated the model using Navisworks, architectural, structural, MEP. We had fortnightly design team meetings where we sat around the table. We did this on a big projector, just in this format. We looked at the clashes, we looked at the information, we took that away from the meetings, we rectified the model, shared them again, and the process went forward. And, you know, the justification of that, it works. Doing this clash detection in 3 dimensions on a projector in a live environment with the stakeholders around the table, it's the best way to do it. It really works. There's no more 2-dimensional drawings over the top of each other. Everybody buys into the 3D. A couple of visuals there of the various models federated together in Navisworks. So here's an example of a clash there that was identified. One of the design team meetings. That was reported. We ran custom rule sets. And at this point, this is when we started to establish the prefabrication elements of our model. Lange Rourke looked at our model and they looked at what they could prefabricate off-site, because off-site prefabrication is cheaper. It's much better for health and safety. It means the build on-site is quicker, which means that's cheaper too. So the government's message is being reinforced. So 2013 was about learning and education. 2014 for us now is about implementation. We've delivered our suite of documents within the practice. We've told everybody to deliver the models using this format. Give people some time to practice, give them time to have a mind shift. They need to understand how the workflow is different in 2D to how it is in 3D. People are used to having a way of doing things that it just gets done. And they want to just stick with that. But you have to demonstrate that there is another alternative. And by demonstrating it, you show that that alternative can be quicker. And then they start to get it and they start to get on board. I know we've got things wrong, but you have to capture the mistakes. You can't come back at the end of the project I found and do a post-project evaluation. It's capturing the mistakes as they happen. Don't think or don't delay that. Don't put it off to the next week or the next month because you'll forget. So one of the important messages to pass on there. One of the deliverables for the UK for 2016 is Kobe. We're not looking at Kobe yet in the UK. We're going to wait for them to sort out their classification first because that has a huge bearing on delivery of Kobe. Don't think that's it. I don't know whether there was another slide, but it must be the end. So hopefully that was helpful.